It was one of those nights when the wind seems to speak. I remember it like it was yesterday. The lights of Denver reflecting in the puddles, the distant sound of a saxophone playing on the corner, and the uncomfortable silence inside the empty restaurant. I had worked there for over 10 years, serving expensive dinners to people who never remembered my name. But that night, something told me that fate was about to change. The tables were set, the smell of onions and garlic hung in the air, and the clock struck almost 10. I was about to close when I saw a figure outside, shivering, huddled against the cold. It was a man, perhaps 60 years old, his face covered by a beard and his eyes lost in the darkness. There was something about him that captivated me, not his miserable appearance, but his gaze, as if he had seen the whole world and still carried hope. Before continuing, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all His infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, because we can never lose faith in God, for He will never abandon us, because His love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you. That man looked like he hadn't eaten in days. I could feel his stomach aching just by looking at him. The restaurant was already closing, the manager had left, and the pots were getting cold in the kitchen. I hesitated for a moment, remembering the rules. No charity, Michael. This is a business, not a church. But at that moment, my conscience outweighed my fear. I grabbed a bowl, poured myself some hot soup, and went to the door. "Sir, the restaurant is closing soon, but here's something to warm you up," I said, trying to smile. He slowly looked up, and for a moment, I saw tears reflecting in the streetlights. "God bless you, son," he replied, his hoarse voice sounding like he'd crossed the desert. I shook my head, never imagining that those words would resonate within me for so long. I went back inside feeling a strange peace, as if I had done something right in a world that so often seems wrong. I knew I could lose my job, but I also knew I wouldn't be able to sleep if I left him there, freezing. I washed my hands, turned off the lights, and left the restaurant. That night, I slept with a light heart, believing that God had seen my gesture. The next morning, everything seemed normal. The sun streamed through the blinds, the coffee steamed in the cup, and I even whistled on my way to work. But something was different in the air, a kind of tense silence, like the one that precedes a storm. When I arrived, the manager, Mr. Peterson, was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, with an expression I had never seen before. "Michael, I need to talk to you in the office." "No." The ground seemed to disappear beneath my feet. I entered slowly, trying to understand what was happening. The table was covered in papers, and the computer displayed the previous night's sales records. He pointed to the screen, his finger trembling with anger. "What is this?" he asked. "A soup delivered without payment. Can you explain?" My heart raced. I felt sweat trickling down my back, and the words simply wouldn't come out. I tried to explain what had happened, that it was just a bowl of soup, that the man was cold and hungry. But the more I spoke, the more he looked at me with contempt. "You stole from the restaurant, Michael. Theft is theft, no matter the value." "Sir, it was only $5, I murmured, almost voiceless. He stepped forward and shouted, $5 or 500, it's the same crime. Grab your things and get out before I call the police." That word, police, echoed like thunder. My colleagues started looking, whispering amongst themselves. Some looked away, others pretended to tidy tables. I stood there, motionless, trying to understand how a simple gesture of compassion could turn into a cause for shame. I gathered my things slowly, my apron, my pen, the small notepad where I wrote down requests. When I looked at the hall for the last time, the reflection of the lights seemed to mock me. I remembered the beggar's words, "God bless you, son." And I wondered, would he still bless me now? I left without looking back. Outside, the wind was colder than ever. I sat on the curb and took a deep breath, trying to hold back tears. An old waiter, fired for serving $5 soup. The world can be cruel, I thought. But a voice inside me said, "It's not the end, Michael. It's just the beginning." And in a suit. I had no idea what was about to happen. Because that same man, the sad-eyed beggar, still had something in store for me. Something that would change my life in a way that not even the most dramatic Hollywood movies would dare to imagine. I spent the next few days trying to understand what had happened. You know when something just doesn't make sense? I had lost my job for trying to be human, for trying to act like someone who still believes that kindness shouldn't be priceless. But the real world, the one made of spreadsheets and rules, rarely understands the heart. The rent was overdue, the phone rang with collection calls, and fear began to take root within me. Every morning was a struggle to get out of bed, to pretend I still had a purpose. The people who used to invite me for coffee now looked away. Deep down, I knew. Nobody wants to be around someone who carries the weight of failure. I started walking the streets of Denver, looking for "Help Wanted" signs. I handed out resumes at coffee shops, diners, even cheap motels. And every time someone saw the name of my old restaurant, the question that cut me off came up, "Oh, aren't you that waiter who got fired for theft?" Shame haunted me like a shadow. I tried to explain, but no one wanted to listen. Rules are rules, they said. And the world went on, indifferent. At night, I would sit on the edge of my bed and pray. Lord, if I was wrong, forgive me. But if I did right, give me strength not to give up. My faith was the only thing I had left. I remembered stories from the Bible, of men who were wronged but remained steadfast. Joseph was imprisoned for something he didn't do. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. And yet, God honored them. Perhaps, just perhaps, my desert experience also had a purpose. One morning, as I passed by the restaurant where it all began, I felt a mixture of pain and longing. Inside, other waiters served smiles, and the new employee took my place. I stood there on the sidewalk, invisible, like a memory that time tries to erase. And it was there, in that instant, that something in me changed. I could continue lamenting, or I could reinvent myself. I took a deep breath and went into a nearby coffee shop. I ordered a black coffee and started writing ideas on a napkin. Maybe open a small delivery service? Perhaps cook at home, offer simple meals? But the problem remained the same. I had no money. $5, the price of the soup, now seemed like a distant luxury. Every coin counted. I did odd jobs, cleaning yards, helping elderly people carry groceries, anything that would pay for dinner. The nights were the worst. The cold cut through my skin, and the silence seemed to mock me. Sometimes I would see beggars sleeping under torn blankets and wonder if that would be my fate. But there was always a small voice, soft, persistent, saying, "Keep going. It's not over yet." One day, I received a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Michael," asked a female voice. "This is Hope Diner. We need a temporary waiter. Are you still available?" My heart almost leaped. I accepted immediately, thanking God 1,000 times through tears. The restaurant was located in a humble neighborhood, but it had a beautiful name, Hope. I saw that as a sign. The owner, a kind gentleman named George, greeted me with a genuine smile. "I don't care about your past, young man," he said. "I only care about what you do from now on." Those words ignited something inside me. For the first time in weeks, someone looked at me without judgment. I worked hard. I washed dishes, waited tables, cleaned the floor. Every tip felt like a miracle. And little by little, I began to recover something I thought I had lost, my dignity. But even amidst requests and smiles, I still thought about the beggar. Where was he now? Had he survived the winter? There were nights when I dreamed of that face, the calm gaze, the hoarse voice, and I would wake up with a strange feeling, as if something was still about to happen. One Sunday, after work, I stayed to close the cash register. Everyone had already left, and I was about to leave when I saw a shadow in the doorway. It was a man standing in the rain. For a second, I thought I was seeing a ghost. My heart pounded. He entered slowly, his boots wet, his expensive coat dripping onto the floor. His face, it was familiar, yet different. His beard was gone, his hair was combed, and his eyes, those eyes, were the same ones that had thanked me on that cold night. "May I sit down?" he asked, with a serene smile. I shook my head, unable to say anything. He settled at the table, crossed his hands, and looked at me with a curious glint. "You probably don't remember me." "How could I forget?" I replied, my voice breaking. He smiled, as if he understood more than he showed. "You gave me something money can't buy, Michael. A hot soup, and faith in humanity. The words echoed in the air. I stood motionless, the dish towel still in my hands. All I could think was, why did he come back? He looked around, observing the simple restaurant, and said, I like this place. It reminds me of what it's like to start over. The silence that followed seemed sacred. The rain pattered against the windows, the clock was almost 9, and I sensed that something important was about to happen. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and said something that made my heart stop for a moment. Michael, I came back because I need to talk to you. By the way, my name isn't exactly what you think. He paused, as if preparing to change an entire life with a single sentence. And it was there, that night, that I realized nothing in my story was over. What seemed like the end was just the beginning of a turning point I would never forget. Because that man, the same one I saved with a $5 soup, was about to reveal a secret that would change everything I knew about compassion, justice, and destiny. And what he said next, it's something that still gives me chills just thinking about it. For a few seconds, I simply stood there, staring at that man. The memory of the cold night I met him came back like a flash. The smell of the soup, the wind cutting my face, the lights flickering on the wet asphalt. And now, before me, the same man seemed different. Rich. Confident. Mysterious. He pulled a small card, gold-edged, from his pocket and placed it on the table. My name is Richard Hamilton, he said. I read and reread the name, trying to process what I was seeing. The card said, Hamilton Investments Group. It was a name I'd heard in the news, one of the country's biggest investors. My heart raced. Wait, are you saying that it is that one Richard Hamilton? The owner of the Hamilton Suites hotel chain. He chuckled softly. It depends. Which version of me do you believe? The man in the expensive suit or the old man in the tattered coat who asked you for soup? That question hit me like a punch. He watched me in silence, as if waiting for my reaction. I, not knowing what to say, just shook my head. I don't understand. Why were you dressed like that? Why did you come to me? Richard took a deep breath and placed his hands on the table. Sometimes, Michael, money blinds you. You start to think that kindness is a currency, and that everything has a price. So, one day I decided to test the world. I spent 3 months living on the streets, just to see who would still be able to see the human being and not just their appearance. I was speechless. It was as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Everything I had experienced in the last few weeks, the shame, the anger, the pain, suddenly seemed part of something bigger. And what did you discover? I asked. He looked me in the eyes. I found that most people turn their faces away. But you, Michael, you saw me. The words echoed within me. I felt my eyes welling up. I tried to look away, but he continued speaking, his voice firm yet gentle. You gave me something no one has given me in months. Dignity. That bowl of soup was the greatest feast of my life. I wanted to answer, but the words wouldn't come out. Part of me was happy, the other part, confused. It all seemed too surreal. But there's something you need to know, he said, interrupting my thoughts. That night changed more than just your life. It changed mine, too. He said that after returning to his world, he could no longer live the same way. The expensive dinners, the million-dollar meetings, everything seemed empty. Kindness is an investment that money can never multiply, Michael. Only the heart can. That phrase stuck in my mind like fire. I, a simple, recently fired waiter, had touched the heart of a millionaire. But what he said next was even more unbelievable. Since that day, I've been following what's happened to you. Your dismissal, your attempts to start over, your work here at Hope Diner. I've seen it all. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Did you follow me? Let's just say I've been observing and learning. Because the way you reacted to injustice taught me more about character than any MBA. He opened a leather briefcase he was carrying and took out some papers. I'm putting together a new project. Something big. And I want you with me. I stared at him, confused. But sir, I'm just a waiter. No, Michael. You're the kind of man the world needs in business. Someone who still believes in empathy. He began to explain, a new chain of restaurants, based on human principles, good food, fair prices, jobs for those in need. I want this project to be built on faith, compassion, and service to others. I want it to reflect what I saw in you. My heart seemed to beat to a different rhythm. I, the man who had been fired for giving away soup, was now sitting before a millionaire who spoke of hope and purpose. It was poetic, almost divine. But I still had my doubts. Why me, sir? What makes you trust someone so much who hasn't even finished high school? Richard smiled. Because God showed you to me, Michael. And when God points you out, you don't question it. Those words made me tremble. He believed in God. And he saw our meeting as something guided by him. I want to offer you a chance to start over, he said, pushing an envelope toward me. Inside here is a check. It's the first investment in you. My hands were trembling. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside, there was a check with so many zeros that my eyes went crazy. I can't accept this, I murmured. I did nothing to deserve this. He tilted his head. You did what few would do. And that's exactly why you deserve it. The air felt lighter, as if God had breathed hope into that restaurant. But before I could thank him, Richard stood up, straightened his coat, and said, It's not time to thank me yet, Michael. This is just the beginning. I stood there, watching him leave in the light rain. And for a moment, I thought I was dreaming. But when I looked at the check in my hands again, I realized it was real. Totally real. That piece of paper was the gateway to a new destiny. What I didn't know was that along with him would come challenges that would test not only my faith, but the true meaning of the word gratitude. And deep down, I felt something even bigger was coming. Something that would change not only my life, but the lives of everyone around me. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I barely slept. The envelope with the check was on the table, and I stared at it as one gazes into a mirror of the impossible. Each number there seemed like a promise, but also a challenge. I knew that if I accepted, nothing would ever be the same again. I picked up the phone and called the only friend I still had from the old restaurant, Tom, the cook. He always supported me, even after I was fired. Tom, you won't believe what happened yesterday. I told him everything, from the reunion to the check. There was silence on the other end. Michael, he finally said, this sounds too good to be true. Be careful, my friend. Rich people never do anything without a reason. I laughed awkwardly. Part of me wanted to believe in a miracle, but another part still carried the distrust of someone who had already been betrayed. Even so, I decided to trust him. I took the bus and went to the nearest bank. The teller looked at me twice, surprised by the amount of the check. Do you wish to deposit or withdraw? He asked, with a formality I had never seen before. Deposit, I replied, feeling my hands sweating. As I filled out the paperwork, I felt something different, like a new page was being written. I remembered the verse my mother always used to say, "The humble will be exalted." Perhaps that was the moment when God was showing me that He had never abandoned me. In the following days, my life began to change little by little. Richard called me several times, explaining the project in detail. He wanted to open a chain of restaurants that valued people, not just profit. We'll call it Grace Table, he said, because everyone deserves a place at the table. I was moved. It was exactly what I believed. I want to start with those who need it most, I suggested. People who lost their jobs, the elderly, single mothers. He agreed immediately. You'll lead this, Michael. I trust your heart. I never imagined I'd hear something like that. I went from a forgotten waiter to managing a dream. I worked day and night. I made spreadsheets, conducted interviews, hired teams. And every time someone got an opportunity, I remembered the man I was, and the soup that changed everything. But the world doesn't forgive those who rise too quickly. Soon the murmuring began. Some longtime employees looked at me with disdain. The kind waiter has now become the boss, they said behind my back. I pretended not to hear, but inside, it hurt. One day, I was called into a meeting with investors. It was my first big presentation. I put on my best suit, the same one I wore to my sister's wedding, and walked into the conference room with my heart racing. Richard wasn't there that day. "He's traveling," they said. "But he trusts you." Those words gave me courage. I spoke for almost an hour about purpose, empathy, and faith. When I finished, the silence was absolute. One of the investors, a cold man with a hard expression, crossed his arms. "You want to mix charity with business," he said ironically. "That doesn't make a profit, Mr. Michael." I took a deep breath. Sometimes, the profit isn't in the numbers. It's in the lives we change. The room seemed to freeze. Some laughed. Others looked away. I knew I was swimming against the current. But I didn't care. In the following days, I realized something strange was happening. My emails started being ignored, meetings canceled, decisions reversed without explanation. Something was wrong. Then, one Friday afternoon, I received a call from Tom. "Michael, did you see the news?" I hadn't. I turned on the TV and my heart froze. A reporter was talking about an alleged fraud involving Grace Table. Someone had used forged documents in my name. The images showed my face, photos of me with Richard, and cruel headlines: "Waiter becomes manager and is already involved in a scandal." The ground disappeared beneath my feet. I could barely breathe. I called Richard, but the phone went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. Suddenly, the same world that had applauded me turned its back on me. And everything I had built seemed to crumble. The newspapers wanted interviews, the banks froze my account, and my new employees began to doubt me. I was called to testify. On the way, I looked up at the sky and murmured, "Lord, why? Why all this again?" The rain began to fall, heavy, washing my face as if the sky were weeping with me. Inside, the investigator looked at me coldly. "Mr. Michael, we need to know, do you have any connection to Hamilton Investments?" "Yes," I replied. "Richard Hamilton is my friend." He stared at me for a long time and said, "Interesting. Because Mr. Richard Hamilton has been missing for 3 weeks." My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. Everything went silent. Missing? How can he be missing? I saw him just a few days ago. He gave me a check, talked to me, dreamed with me. The investigator slid a photo across the table. It was the last image recorded of him. The day of our meeting at the Hope Diner. I looked at the photo and felt my legs go weak. There we were, me, smiling, and him beside me. But behind us, a dark figure, watching through the window. "Do you have any idea who this man is?" the agent asked. I stared, trying to remember. And then, something inside me snapped. I had seen that face before. But where? When? The image seemed to haunt me, and the answer was closer than I imagined. I left the police station with trembling legs, completely bewildered. The city seemed colder, more distant, as if the world had turned its back on me again. Richard, the man who had given me back hope, was missing. And I was the prime suspect. Crossing the wet streets, I felt the weight of shame crushing me. The wind whipped against my face, and memories mingled like an endless film. The soup, the check, Richard's smile, the promises. Everything seemed like a shattered dream. I spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling of my small room. "Lord, show me what's happening," I murmured. "If all this is a trial, give me strength to endure it." I wanted to believe there was still a purpose, but the pain was too strong. The next day, I knocked on Tom's door. He looked at me with pity. "Michael, the agents were here. They said Richard might have been the victim of a scam, and that you're the last person to see him." I tried to explain, but he just lowered his eyes. "I want to believe you, my friend. But all of this is too strange." Those words hurt me more than any accusation. I went home and sat at the table. I picked up the check envelope and stared at the signature. Something caught my attention. The stroke of the R was different. Firmer. More elegant. Could it be? I tried comparing it to an old signature from an interview I found online. They didn't match. The handwriting was completely different. My heart started racing. What if that check hadn't been signed by Richard? I picked up the phone and called the bank again. After a few minutes, the operator answered in a cold voice. "Mr. Michael, the check deposited 5 days ago has been blocked due to suspected fraud." My whole body went cold. Fraud. But the check was real. I received it from him personally. I'm sorry, sir, but the signature doesn't match the official records. You need to appear in person. I hung up the phone and stood paralyzed. The world was spinning, the ground seemed to move. Everything I had built was crumbling once again. It was as if fate was testing me, and I no longer knew if it was a divine trial or a human trap. I spent the day walking around the city, trying to piece things together. Every corner seemed to carry an echo of my own guilt. Had I been deceived? Was that man not who he said he was? I went to the Hope Diner, the place where it all began. George greeted me with a worried look. "Michael, are you all right? I heard the news." I shook my head. "Nothing makes sense, George. Nothing." He served me coffee and said calmly, "My son, when God allows the ground to open up, it's because He wants us to see what's hidden underneath." I remained silent. That made me think. Perhaps there was something hidden, something I couldn't see yet. That same night, I went back to my old restaurant, the one that fired me. The doors were locked, the lights were off. But I needed to see, I needed to understand. I left the car on the corner and approached on foot. The rain was beginning to fall lightly, and the facade reflected the streetlights. Suddenly, I noticed something strange. Someone inside. A shadow moving. My heart raced. I tried to look out the window, but the panes were fogged up. I moved closer, my face almost pressed against the glass. That's when I saw it, a figure standing still, motionless, watching me from the darkness. I took a step back. The reflection from the street illuminated his face for a second, and I froze. It was the same man from the photo the investigator had shown me. The one who was behind me and Richard. Before I could react, the lights went out completely. I ran to the door, banged on it, shouted, "Nothing." The silence was absolute. Fear gripped me. I picked up the phone and dialed the police, but the signal disappeared. No service. The wind howled like a warning. Suddenly, I heard a crack behind me. I turned around quickly, and a dark envelope fell from the doorframe, landing right at my feet. Inside, there was only one sheet of paper, with a single handwritten sentence. "Not everything is as it seems, Michael. He's still alive." My blood ran cold. I looked around, searching for whoever could have left that. Nothing. Just the rain, the wind, and the feeling that someone was watching me. I ran back home, the envelope clutched in my hands. Each step felt heavier. When I arrived, I locked the doors and sat on the floor, trying to understand. "He's still alive." The words echoed in my head. Could it be? Richard, alive? I picked up the envelope again and noticed something I had missed before, a small gold stamp on the back. A lion symbol. That same stamp I saw on the leather briefcase Richard was carrying on the day of the meeting. My heart raced. This couldn't be a coincidence. Someone knew more than I did. Someone was behind it all. And maybe, just maybe, Richard was still trying to tell me something. That night, before falling asleep, I looked at the ceiling and murmured, "Lord, if he is alive, show me the way." And then the phone rang, an unknown number, once again. I answered with a trembling voice. On the other end, a hoarse, familiar voice said only 4 words. "Michael, we need to meet." For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. That voice, hoarse, serene, impossible to forget, pierced the silence of my house like a lightning bolt. "Michael, we need to meet." My heart almost stopped. "Richard, is that you?" On the other end, a brief pause, and a whisper, "Go to the old pier tomorrow midnight. Alone." Before I could answer, the call dropped. I tried to call back, but the number was blocked. I looked at the clock, 11:45. 15 minutes to midnight. I grabbed my coat, the envelope, and left without thinking twice. The city slept. The streets were almost deserted, except for a few flickering lampposts and the distant sound of a train. The icy wind cut my face, but I barely felt it. I could only think about those words, "He is still alive." I arrived at the pier a little early. The lights on the dock flickered, reflecting on the dark river. The place looked like something out of a film noir. I walked to the end of the walkway, my heart pounding. "Richard!" I called, my voice trembling. No answer. I waited a few seconds. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Slowly, a figure emerged from the darkness. Long coat, hat pulled down, and the sound of the wind carrying every movement. "You came," said the voice, deep and familiar. My eyes filled with tears. "My God, it's you." He lifted his face, and, for the first time in weeks, I saw Richard. Thinner, more worn, but alive. "I thought you were dead," I cried. He smiled slightly. "Almost, Michael. Almost. We need to talk, but not here," he whispered. "They're watching." The sentence sent shivers down my spine. "Who's watching?" He looked around and replied in a low voice, "Those who can't stand the truth." We walked to an old, abandoned warehouse near the docks. The smell of rust and salt filled the air. Richard locked the door from the inside and turned to me. "What I'm about to tell you, Michael, you mustn't repeat to anyone." I nodded, still breathless. He took a deep breath and began. "After we met at the Hope Diner, I noticed someone was following me. I thought it was a coincidence, but days later I received a message saying, 'Stop investing in the Grace Table Project.'" "But who would do that?" I asked. He lowered his head. "The board of my own company. They wanted me to cancel everything, saying that charity doesn't generate profit. When I refused, they started digging into my life, my contacts, they even threatened me." The words sounded unreal. "So, they made you disappear?" Richard nodded. "Yes. They faked my death. They took me out of the picture. And to top it all off, they tried to blame you. They wanted to destroy any trace of the project." I felt the ground disappear beneath me. "But why? What does this have to do with me?" He looked me in the eyes and said, "Because you are the symbol of the compassion they fear. You are proof that an ordinary man can change the system." I remained silent, trying to absorb each word. "They're coming after you, Michael. They're probably already watching you." I looked around, startled. "But why call me, then? This is dangerous." He smiled. "Because I trust you, and because what comes next will require faith." He pulled a flash drive from his pocket and placed it on the rusty table. "Here are all the documents, transaction records, proof of the fraud. If anything happens to me again, hand this over to the press." I carefully picked up the flash drive. "And what's going to happen to you?" He took a deep breath. "I have to disappear for a while longer. There's still something I need to do." The dim light from the shed reflected on his face, and for a moment he seemed older, more tired. "You know, Michael," he said, "that night you gave me the soup, I thought I was saving my faith in humanity. But today I realize it was God who used you to remind me of what really matters." I was speechless. I felt tears streaming down my face. "Richard, I don't know what to say." He smiled. "Just say you'll keep going. That you won't let the flame go out." "I promise," I replied. And in that instant, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A presence, a force, something bigger than myself. Richard placed his hand on my shoulder. "Faith is the bridge between the impossible and the inevitable. Don't lose it." Suddenly, a metallic sound cut through the air. A noise coming from outside. We both turned around. "They found us," Richard murmured. The windows began to vibrate. Footsteps. Flashlights. Distant voices. He ran to a side door and pushed me. "Go, Michael. Get out of here now. And you. I'll delay them. Take the evidence. Don't look back." I ran. My boots pounded on the wooden floor, the sound echoing across the dock. Behind me, the noise of doors being broken down, voices shouting. When I reached the street, I turned around for a second and saw the flash. An explosion shook the warehouse, sending a cloud of fire and smoke into the midnight sky. I shouted his name, but only the echo answered. I ran to the dock, my tears mingling with the rain. "Richard!" I shouted again, but there was only the sound of the wind and the crackling of the flames. I fell to my knees, the flash drive still clutched in my hand. "Lord, what do I do now?" And that's when I heard a noise behind me. One footstep. Then another. I turned around slowly, my heart almost leaping out of my chest. And there, amidst the fog and flickering lights, a silhouette slowly approached, holding the same coat Richard had worn minutes before. But it wasn't Richard. It was someone I never thought I'd see again. That silhouette walked slowly toward me, enveloped in the river mist and the smoke from the explosion. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound of my own heartbeat seeming to echo in the silence of the early morning. When the light from a street lamp finally illuminated its face, my legs gave way. It was a woman. Tall, with gray hair and a firm gaze. "Michael?" she asked, her voice soft but full of authority. I hesitated, confused. "Who are you?" She approached fearlessly, clutching Richard's charred coat. "My name is Eleanor Hamilton." Hamilton. His last name. I was in shock. "You are related to him?" She nodded slowly. "I'm Richard's sister." For a few seconds, I couldn't react. The rain was pounding. The pier trembled with a distant echo of the explosion. "Is he alive?" I asked, holding my breath. She looked away. "I don't know. But if he is, he doesn't have much time left." Eleanor led me to a black car parked a few meters away. We got in. The interior smelled of leather and expensive cologne. "Michael," she began, "I know you're scared. But you need to listen to me carefully. My brother has put you in the middle of something much bigger than you realize." "What are you talking about?" I asked. She started the engine and sped off down the wet road. Richard didn't tell the whole story. Hamilton Investments isn't just an investment group. It's an empire, and someone inside is willing to kill to protect it. The words sounded unreal. Kill. She glanced at me quickly. That explosion wasn't an accident. It was a cover-up. And you, Michael, are now next on the list. I was speechless. I looked out the window, the city lights fading into the distance, and a feeling of emptiness washed over me. "Why me? I only gave some soup." Eleanor sighed. "Because that soup changed everything. You became the symbol Richard needed, living proof that there is still true goodness in the world, and that threatens those who profit from misery." "But what do they want from me?" I asked, my voice trembling. She gave me an intense look. "They want to silence you. They want to erase the story before it inspires others." I remained silent. Outside, the sound of the rain mingled with the rumble of tires on the road. It was as if God were telling me, through the chaos, trust, even when all seems lost. Eleanor parked the car in front of a small, abandoned chapel on the outskirts of town. "We're safe here for now," she said. The place smelled of damp wood and old wax. Crossing the dark nave, I saw old, dusty images of saints. "Why here?" I asked. She lit a candle. "It was my brother's refuge. When the world was falling apart, he would come here to pray." The light flickered, casting shadows on the walls. I sat on one of the benches and ran my hands over my face. "Eleanor, this is all madness. I'm no hero. I'm just a waiter who tried to do good." She came closer and placed her hand on my shoulder. "And that's exactly why you're dangerous to them. Because powerful men don't know how to handle the purity of faith." Those words made me tremble. I looked at the cross on the altar and felt a lump in my throat. "What does God want from me?" I asked, almost in a whisper. "He wants you to continue, Michael. To tell the truth." At that moment, I remembered the flash drive. I took it out of my pocket and placed it on the altar. Eleanor observed it intently. "This is what they want to destroy. Inside it is proof that the Hamilton Group financed international corruption schemes. Richard discovered everything, and that's why they tried to kill him." "My God," I murmured. She nodded. "But there's something else you need to know. Richard wasn't the only one in the company trying to change the course of things." "What do you mean?" "Someone helped you from the beginning, Michael. Someone from the inside." My heart raced. "Who?" She stepped back a few paces, looking out the broken window. "The same man who signed your resignation at the first restaurant." The memory hit me like a bolt of lightning. "Peterson?" I asked in disbelief. She turned slowly. "Yes." "The manager who fired you. He was part of the scheme, but something changed in him after you left. It seems like you touched him too. I felt a chill. He hated me. Maybe. But he also saw in you what we all saw, true faith. And now, he's the only person who knows where Richard is. So he's alive? I asked, my heart pounding. Eleanor took a deep breath. Maybe. If Peterson is still on our side, we have a chance. She opened an old wooden box under the altar and took out a worn Bible. Inside it was a small photograph, Richard, Eleanor, and a man in the background, smiling. Peterson. Richard believed that every encounter in our lives has a divine purpose, she said, looking at the photo. He said that God writes straight with crooked lines. I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the tears. Eleanor, what should I do? She stared at me intently. You must find him. Peterson. He is the key to saving not only Richard's legacy, but your own life. The candle flickered, casting shadows across the chapel ceiling. The wind blew through the windows, making the cross creak. But be careful, she continued. They already know you still have the flash drive. And they won't stop. A thunderclap rumbled outside. The sound seemed like a divine warning. I took a deep breath and said, Then I will find him. Not for myself, but for him. For Richard. Eleanor smiled slightly. God is with you, Michael. But remember, when the time comes, the truth may cost you more than you imagine. She handed me a small piece of paper with a handwritten address. This is where Peterson usually stays. An old hotel near the road. But go before dawn. I took the paper, folded it carefully, and looked at her. And you. I need to lose whoever is following us. We'll meet you there. The rain intensified. The candles began to go out one by one. I ran to the car, started the engine, and drove off down the deserted road. The sky, now filled with lightning, seemed to foreshadow something inevitable. When I looked in the rear-view mirror, the chapel was already disappearing into the fog. But for a brief moment, I swear I saw something inside, a shadow moving behind the altar. And then I realized that Eleanor hadn't taken Richard's coat with her. The same coat that now disappeared into the darkness, as if it had started walking on its own again. The road seemed endless, a thin strip of asphalt cutting through the darkness. The rain still fell, fine and persistent, and the car wipers squeaked like a metronome of anxiety. The paper with Peterson's address trembled in my hands. I had no idea what I would find. I only knew that I needed to keep going. The hotel was on the outskirts of Boulder, an old building with a flashing sign and a musty smell in the air. I entered with my coat hood pulled up and approached the counter. "Good evening," I murmured. The receptionist, a tired-looking woman, looked up. "I'm looking for a man named Peterson. Is he staying here?" She hesitated, glanced to the side, and replied in a low voice, "Room 13. I thanked her and slowly climbed the stairs. Each step creaked as if to betray my presence. When I reached the door, I stopped. For a few seconds, I stood there, listening. Nothing. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again. A sound of footsteps, then the click of the lock. The door opened slowly. The man before me looked aged, unshaven, sunken eyes, the look of someone carrying too many secrets. "Michael," he said, with a tone that mixed surprise and guilt. "Peterson." The name came out heavy. I stood there, my heart torn between anger and relief. He made room for me to enter. The room was simple, a desk, a lamp, and papers scattered everywhere. In the center, a laptop displayed a spreadsheet full of numbers and names. "You came looking for me," he said. "I thought you'd never want to see me again." I crossed my arms. "After what you did, I really shouldn't have." He sighed. "I know I owe you more than an apology, Michael. But there's something you need to know. Something Richard wanted me to tell you." My whole body tensed. "Is Richard alive?" "Yes," he replied without hesitation. "But not for long if we don't act fast." I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process it. So it was all staged. My dismissal, the accusation, even the explosion. Peterson nodded. "It was all part of a plan to protect you. You were the only one who couldn't be officially involved. Richard knew his enemies would use you. The words pierced me like knives. Protect? Did destroying me seem like the best way to protect myself? He lowered his head. I had no choice. They threatened me, Michael. Me and my family. I needed to look like the villain. The silence between us was thick. The only light came from the flickering lamp. And now? I asked. He took a deep breath and pointed to the laptop screen. Now it's time for you to decide. Richard wants you to take over what he started. He frowned. Assume? What does that mean? Peterson clicked on a file. Documents from the network appeared on the screen. Grace table, but with my name as the majority partner. The project is yours now, Michael. Legally. My heart raced. This is madness. I can't own an entire network. He stepped closer, firm. You can. And you should. Because you're the only one Richard trusts. The only one who understands what this mission means. I felt the world spin. You don't understand. I'm just an ordinary man. Peterson smiled slightly. And that's exactly what makes you extraordinary. I paced the room, restless. If I accept, they'll come after me. They're already after you, he replied without hesitation. I sat down again, holding my head in my hands. And what does Richard want me to do? He wants you to take the project forward. But in a different way, by offering free meals every Sunday to those who can't afford them. I looked at Peterson in disbelief. This will go bankrupt in weeks. He smiled. That's what I told Richard. And you know what he replied? Then let it be a blessed bankruptcy. That phrase struck me. It was the kind of madness that only made sense to someone who believed in miracles. Michael, you have something none of us had, faith. Richard knew God would do the rest through you. I stood silent, staring at the ground. Outside, a clap of thunder echoed, and for a second, the light flickered. If I accept this, my life will never be the same again. Peterson nodded. Not many people's either. I picked up the flash drive and placed it on the table. I have the evidence. If anything happens to me, I want the world to know. He looked at me respectfully. Are you really going to do that? Not for me. For all those who still believe in good. He opened a drawer and took out an envelope. Richard knew this day would come. He asked me to deliver this to you personally. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The letters were familiar, firm, calm, full of purpose. I read it silently. Michael, if you're reading this, it's because the plan worked, or almost. I knew they would come after me, but I never imagined the cost would be so high. Still, I believe. I believe God chose you to continue what we started. Turn pain into food. Turn fear into bread. Where there is hunger, serve hope. Where there is doubt, serve faith. Tears streamed down my face. It was as if Richard were there, talking to me. He believed in you more than anyone else, Peterson said. And now, the fate of Grace Table, it's in your hands. But why me? Why not you, or Eleanor? Because you two still have something that money can't buy, purity. I held the letter close to my chest. Eleanor is helping me. She said she would come here. Peterson turned serious. Eleanor? Michael, she's dead. The words hit me like a bolt of lightning. What? She died 3 years ago. Before it all began. That's what destroyed Richard. I stood motionless, my breath caught in my throat. But I saw her. I spoke to her. She took me to the chapel, gave me this address. Peterson stared at me, pale. So, you didn't talk to Eleanor? The lamp flickered again. The wind rattled against the window, and the flame of the candle I didn't remember lighting flickered in the corner of the room. Peterson stood up slowly, his gaze fixed on the door. Michael, we're not alone. A metallic sound echoed from the hallway, slow, steady footsteps approaching. Shadows moved beneath the door, and a cold voice echoed outside, Hand over the flash drive, Michael. And nobody needs to get hurt. Peterson looked at me, tense. It's him. Who? The man who tried to kill Richard. The footsteps stopped. The silence was cutting. And then, the doorknob began to turn. The doorknob turned slowly, the metallic sound echoing through the room like a warning. Peterson positioned himself in front of me, his gaze determined. "Behind me, Michael," he said in a low voice. I could feel the fear pulsing in my veins, my heart pounding like a war drum. The door opened with a dry click. A tall man entered, dressed in black, his face partially hidden by a raincoat. The flickering light of the lamp revealed only his eyes, cold, calculating, like those of someone who has killed before. "Hand over the flash drive," he said, pointing a gun at us. The barrel gleamed in the light. Peterson stepped forward. "Don't do it. He's not to blame." The man laughed. "Everyone's to blame when they mess with what they don't understand." "Who are you?" I asked, trying to buy time. He approached slowly. "I am the result of your friend Richard's choices. He wanted to play the saint, and now everyone is paying the price." The sound of the rain hitting the window seemed to match the rhythm of the fear. Peterson raised his hands, trying to calm him. "We can talk." "Talking doesn't pay for silence," the man replied, looking at me. That's when I noticed. There was something familiar about that look. The voice, the way he moved his chin. I'd seen him before, in a different context. "Wait," I murmured. "I know you." He smiled slightly. "Yes, you know him." He slowly pulled back his hood, revealing his face, and the shock took my breath away. It was Richard. My body froze. "No, this can't be." He lowered the gun. "Ah, but it is, Michael. It's me." Peterson took a step back, perplexed. "But you died. I saw the report. The explosion." Richard looked at him with a sad smile. "Explosions are useful when you want to disappear." I felt the world spin. "You've been deceiving me this whole time?" "I didn't deceive you," he replied calmly. "I tested you." "Did you test it?" I needed to know if anyone still believed in good. If anyone was capable of choosing the right path without expecting reward. "And you, Michael, were the chosen one." "This is madness!" I screamed. "People died. My life was destroyed." He approached slowly. "Nothing was in vain. Every pain, every loss, every tear. It was all part of the plan." "Plan? What plan, Richard?" He smiled. "The plan to rebuild. Through fire." Peterson stared at him, incredulous. "You lied to all of us." Richard turned to him. "I lied. To save them." The silence was unbearable. The distant sound of sirens echoed outside. "So you've never been in danger?" I asked. He shook his head. "Yes, I have. In danger of being lost forever." Richard lowered his weapon and looked at the flash drive in my hand. "You kept it safe." I gripped it tightly. "Why, Richard? Why use me like this?" He stepped forward. "Because only those who have been humiliated understand the value of compassion. I needed you to feel what I felt when I lost everything. Only then would you be ready to lead." The tears came without warning. "You destroyed me." "I shaped you," he replied, with an almost prophetic calm. Peterson stepped between us. "Richard, this has gone too far. This man believed in you." Richard sighed. "And that's why he now has what I never had, purity of soul." "You're sick," Peterson yelled, and tried to snatch the flash drive from my hand. The gun was pointed again, and the sound of the shot cut through the air like thunder. Time seemed to stand still. Peterson fell to his knees, his hands stained with blood. "No," I murmured, falling beside him. "No, no, no." Richard stood motionless, his breathing heavy. "He forced me." But I couldn't hear him anymore. Tears streamed down my face as I held Peterson, who whispered, "Take the truth, to the end." His eyes went dark. A sacred silence filled the room. Richard lowered his weapon and looked at me. "None of this was in vain. You'll understand someday." I stood up slowly. Something inside me broke. The pain turned to fury. "Do you understand? You killed the only man who believed in redemption." He took a step back. "Michael, Please. Don't call me that, I yelled. I grabbed the flash drive and shoved it into my pocket. I'm going to expose everything. Your entire empire, your lies, your false gospel. Richard tried to approach, but I was already at the door. If you go out that door, they'll destroy you, he said. They already tried, I replied. But those who walk with God do not walk alone. I ran out, my tears mingling with the rain. Outside, the sky seemed to be on fire. Lightning flashed across the horizon, as if the sky itself were judging what had just happened. I ran to the car, the sound of sirens drawing closer. I started the engine and sped down the road, my heart in pieces. In the rearview mirror, I saw the hotel getting smaller, until it disappeared. But, for a moment, I swear I saw Richard standing at the window, watching. And he was smiling. An enigmatic smile, as if he knew that this wouldn't be the last time we'd see each other. I picked up the flash drive and pressed it to my chest, looking up at the sky. Lord, if this is my path, guide me. Because now it's no longer about me. It's about the truth. A flash of lightning illuminated the horizon, and, for a second, I saw a cross formed by the shadows of the lampposts on the wet asphalt. I took that as a sign, and I sped towards dawn, unaware that what awaited me in the next city would change everything once again. The sun was just beginning to rise when I arrived in Denver. The streets were still damp from the previous night's storm, and the cold wind seemed to carry the scent of a new beginning. I stopped the car in front of something I hadn't seen in a long time, the restaurant where it all began. The same one where I got fired for a $5 soup. I stood there for a few minutes, staring at the facade. The lettering on the sign was faded, the paint peeling. It was as if time had frozen the place exactly at the point where my life had changed. I took a deep breath and got out of the car. The key to the flash drive still weighed heavily in my pocket, as if it carried not only secrets, but souls. Each step toward the door felt like a mixture of fear and purpose. When I pushed open the glass, the familiar sound of the bell announced my entrance, and the echo transported me back in time. The room was empty, covered in dust. I walked slowly, touching the tables, remembering each customer, each smile, each cold night I spent there. The chair where the beggar, Richard, sat that night was still there. My heart ached. I approached the counter. The same counter where the manager had accused me. Where my dignity had been ripped away. But now, something inside me was different. I was no longer that man. I picked up my cell phone and called a reporter who had contacted me weeks earlier, curious about Richard's disappearance. I have something you need to see, I said. But I want you to promise me one thing. Tell the truth. No manipulation. We arranged to meet at noon. Until then, I needed a place to pray. I went to the back, where the old kitchen was. The same one where, one day, I served a simple soup. I knelt on the cold floor, closed my eyes, and spoke to God. Lord, I don't understand your plans, but I trust in them. If this story is meant to demonstrate your power, then use my life as you wish. May the truth set free not only me, but all who live in fear. I felt something inside me calm down, as if an invisible hand touched my shoulder. I stood up and looked around. And that's when I realized that place wasn't a symbol of defeat. It was an altar. I grabbed a cloth and started cleaning the tables. One by one, the furniture was revealed beneath the dust. With each movement, it felt like I was cleansing my soul as well. When I finished, the restaurant was alive again, even though it was empty. At precisely noon, the reporter arrived. A young man with a sincere look. "Do you really have proof?" he asked. I handed him the flash drive. "More than that," I replied. "I have a story." He turned on his laptop and began copying the files. The screens showed contracts, bank statements, videos of secret meetings. Everything Richard and Peterson had tried to uncover was there. This is gigantic," said the reporter, shocked. "It's the truth," I replied. "And it needs to come to light." Hours later, the news swept the country. Headlines exploded: Hamilton investment scandal, evidence reveals corruption and fraud in an international network. Photos of me and Richard were spread everywhere. But this time, the world heard the truth. Meanwhile, the restaurant began to receive visitors. Humble, curious people, some just looking for a hot meal. And, without much thought, I decided to serve them. I grabbed a pot, prepared soup, and started handing it out. "Please take a seat," I said, smiling. "Here, no one pays for hope." Soon, neighbors began to help. Volunteers brought bread, vegetables, and donations. The restaurant was reborn, but not as before. Now, it was a place of living faith. Days later, a letter arrived in the mail, with no return address. The envelope had the same golden lion seal. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside, just one sentence. "The table is yours now, Michael. Serve with love." Ah! The tears came again. He was alive. Somewhere, Richard was still watching, perhaps regretful, perhaps at peace. But alive. Over time, the news spread. Other restaurants wanted to follow suit. The Project Grace table he was born again, this time guided not by wealth, but by compassion. People came from far and wide to eat there, but they left taking something greater than food. They left taking faith. One evening, when the activity had already subsided, an elderly lady entered. She was shivering with cold and holding a small rosary between her fingers. "Son, do you have a bowl of soup?" she asked. I smiled, and something inside me lit up. "Of course, ma'am. Make yourself at home." While the soup was bubbling, I looked out the window and saw the moon reflected in the glass, round, perfect, shining like a sign from the sky. I handed her the plate and she took my hand. "God bless you, my son. May He multiply what you do." I felt the tears welling up. Her voice sounded like Richard's on that first night. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Amen." And in that instant, I realized the cycle was complete. The soup that began with compassion had transformed into a network of hope. God had written the story from beginning to end, with crooked lines, yes, but with perfect purpose. And the final lesson echoed in my heart: those who give from the little they have, discover that they always had everything. That night, before turning off the lights, I left a bowl of hot soup by the door. Out of habit, out of faith. And I swear that, as I turned around, I saw a shadow walking away down the street, wearing a long coat and a peaceful smile. The same smile that taught me that miracles can't be explained. They can only be experienced. After all that, I learned that life isn't about what we lose, but about what God rebuilds when everything seems to fall apart. Sometimes, He allows chaos not to punish us, but to reposition us. And it was only in the midst of pain that I understood the true meaning of the word faith. When they took my job away from me, I thought it was the end. When they accused me, I thought I had lost everything. But God was there, silently planting what would one day flourish. Because God's timing is not our timing, and miracles never come early or late. They come at the exact moment when the heart is ready to understand. Today, when I look back, I see that $5 bowl of soup was the seed of a much greater purpose. A seed watered by tears, prayers, and true love. And perhaps you, listening now, also have a soup to offer the world, a small gesture that can change everything. How many times have you refrained from helping someone for fear of losing the little you have? How many times have you thought that what you do makes no difference? Well, let me tell you something. For God, no gesture is small. No love is wasted. And when you act with compassion, the whole of heaven moves in your favor. I don't know what you're going through today. It could be pain, loneliness, injustice, or simply the weariness of life. But if there's one thing this story has taught me, it's that God never abandons those who do good. Even if the world accuses you, He knows what's in your heart. And if your faith is weak, remember this: even a tiny flame can dispel the darkness. Faith doesn't need to be big, it just needs to be true. So I ask you, have you ever experienced something that seemed like the end, but turned out to be a new beginning? Have you ever helped someone without imagining that gesture would come back to save you? What would you do if God placed a beggar on your doorstep today? Would you even see him? Think about it. Maybe the miracle you're waiting for will come disguised as someone who needs help. Maybe the answer you're looking for is in what you have to offer. And before I finish, I want to do the same thing I did back then, when I first told the story. I want to pray for you. Lord, bless everyone who heard this story. May your love reach the weary heart, heal the wounded, and renew the faith of those who think of giving up. May there be peace, health, joy, and purpose in every sunrise. And may there never be a lack of courage to do good, even when no one is watching. Amen. And if this story touched your heart, I kindly ask you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. This helps me continue sharing stories of faith, love, and new beginnings, stories that prove God still writes miracles in the details of life. Because, in the end, all that really matters, it's the love we leave behind along the way.